Oh man, it's been quite the week. Lots, man, it's hard to believe that the NFL is coming to, it's coming to an end, and well, here we are. Everything looks great. We got Satiar Shah today, right here. Just gonna welcome him in. We're gonna get started talking about some Canucks, and hopefully we can. This guy works for Sportsnet, so uh, he knows a lot about what the Canucks are up to, and he's got an excellent perspective. So we're going to welcome him in momentarily. Hey, Sat.
How's it going, Matt?
Hey, it's going good.
How
Good
are
to
you?
good to see you. Oh, I'm doing great.
Awesome.
Yeah, good to see you. Are you using your mobile phone?
Yeah, it's my cell phone. Yeah.
Okay. Do you think you could make it horizontal for me? There we go.
Is that better?
Yeah, that's great.
Okay. Let me get this. It'll help with the lighting.
For sure. Yeah.
I got my partner in the living room doing some stuff, so I got to use the bedroom.
No worries.
All right.
It's all good. Sweet. All right, Satiar Shah, thanks so much for joining me today. I'm honored to have a little bit of your time today, so we can talk a little bit sports. And yeah, thanks for joining me. Um,
Oh,
yeah, absolutely. I was just wondering, let's just pause a little bit and relax.
yeah.
I just want to know how you're doing. How are things? Obviously, it's been a very up and down year with the Canucks in the last few months, ever since the start of the season. So things are a little bit turbulent, perhaps. But yeah, I just want to know how you're doing. How are things?
Yeah. They're good. Personally, they're going well. I can't complain too much. I mean, I wish with the team they were performing a bit better, or we were having some different discussions as opposed to what we keep having, nowadays. But it's been good. It's working in sports radio and being around the guys and people around work. It's always a lot of fun. So honestly, can't complain. Life's good.
Yeah, that's great. Yeah, yeah. I started my show in October, and so right around then it was a great time of sports. I love it when it's like October because there's a little bit of time. I think it's like there's a 2 or 3 week frame when the
Right.
World Series is on, and then NBA and the NHL start. So everything's happening all at once. Obviously, the NFL is on as well. So we got everything. It's a glorious time for sports fans. So personally, I don't care too much about October or November in the NHL because it's very early. It's hard to judge teams and players and etc. How they're doing. Exhibit A would be the Canucks had obviously a rough start to the year, starting pretty much winless in their first seven. And I remember there were a few times in December when they were, I think, like 3 or 4 points away from the final wild card spot. So it's very hard to kind of judge a team, and that's what we do as observers of these sports. And so what can you say now? It's January. We can almost see, March and April. They're approaching the end of the season. We can judge these teams now. It's a great time to kind of see how the Canucks are doing.
Yeah, well, I mean, it's pretty clear where this team is trending at this stage. They're sitting here at 37 points, 40 games into the season, and they're on a worse point percentage and point total than they were last year at this time. And they were obviously trending in a different direction at that time because Boudreaux was here, newly appointed in December. The team was going on a run. They were playing a lot better and trending in the right direction. Whereas now they're sitting here trending in a completely wrong direction. They're not playing well process wise, and they're a fair bit away out. I mean, they're closer to being in the bottom five of the National Hockey League than they are to a wild card spot. So I think it's pretty clear that this team doesn't have what it takes this season to be a playoff team. At this stage, for them to even make that type of push, it would be even more impressive than what the Blues did a few years ago just to make the playoffs. So it becomes something that's really not a likely proposition at this stage. Even and maybe you could talk yourself into it, saying there's a lot of time left, right? 42 games remaining on the season. If the team was playing well and just not getting results, sometimes you see that in hockey. A team is performing well. Their process is good. They're creating chances. They're playing good defense, but they're just not getting saves, maybe, or they're just not getting the bounces. And generally, you feel like, okay, that will turn around. But that's not what we're seeing. Like even that game against Pittsburgh the other night, they're heavily outchanced. They lose 5-4, And we can look at goaltending and say, hey, perhaps Spencer Martin could have had one or two. But when you get outchanced by a 2-1 margin throughout the game, and you have one of the worst defensive processes in the league this year in terms of the environment you're playing in, it's hard to really look at something and say there's evidence to believe they're going to turn things around. So unfortunately, we're sitting here talking about a team that is naturally trending towards the bottom five and trending towards a playoff spot. And I don't think people expected that heading into this season, given what the expectations were and all the moves the team made.
Yeah, absolutely. That's interesting that you say that the Canucks are probably closer to being like one of the worst teams in the league. And I mean, I completely agree with that. I feel like the Canucks, they're not good. They're just a bad team. You can be a bad team and have good players on your team, but like you were saying, the Canucks, they're not getting the wins, they're not getting the bounces, and winning hockey games, that's kind of the issue, right? So obviously, Connor Bedard, he's been a very popular name, and we've brought him to prominence here. But, first of all, personally, I don't believe in playing to lose. I think that you should always be playing to win, which sounds kind of antithetical to the popular term of like tanking, right? Which is what I feel like it's the NBA. They're the ones that have made the word tanking very popular. So as I was saying about how it's January, we can see the end of the year. It's within view, and the Canucks are not going in a positive trajectory right here. So what can we actually expect for the Canucks this year? Because it's such an interesting and unique situation when the incentive to lose is so high.
Yeah, and I think I don't see this team, quote unquote, trying to tank. And what's happening this season is just naturally you're a bottom 7 team. I mean, they have the 7th worst point percentage and point total in the league, so they're really sitting there in the bottom 10 firmly entrenched, and it's happening just naturally. Nobody's trying to tank this year. And I don't see the team trying to lose games on purpose. That's not going to happen. But one thing I do see happening as the trade deadline approaches is they start making the moves they need to start making. And really, one thing I am curious about, though, Matt, is are they going to be able to trade anyone not named Luke Shen and Bo Horvat? Kuzmenko, I think they want to keep, and we'll see what happens. But I'd wager on they'll probably keep him as we get to the trade deadline and sign him to an extension at some point here. Whereas with Bo, it seems like it's trending towards a trade. But so I see them doing those things, like, hey, maybe you move Bo out so you can't sign him. You move Luke Shen because he'll be a rental piece at the deadline. The big question is, are they going to have the opportunity to make trades with players with more term on their contracts, like a Brock Besser, for instance, or even a Connor Garland, or on the back end, someone like a Tyler Myers. And even though there may be a possibility of doing something with a guy like Brock Besser, it seems unlikely. So this notion of this team doing multiple things to tank, quote unquote, by trading guys out, I just think their limits, their options are somewhat limited in trying to do those things this season. And we'll see if they can. But the focus, if you ask most Canucks fans, it's really not about winning hockey games or making a push for the postseason. Generally speaking, it's what are the moves this team is making? What are the trades this team is making? Are they keeping Bo or not? Are they keeping Kuzmenko or not? And can they find ways to move contracts off the books like the organization's talked a lot about? Rutherford's talked about wanting to clear cap space, and he's realized it's been more challenging than they expected coming into the job. So I'd say the focus for the rest of the season is future-oriented moves. What type of trades can this organization make to try to make the future filled with more hope than it presently presents?
Yeah, definitely. That's a really good observation, because I totally think that the Canucks, they can't really, I don't think they can do much of anything other than make these trades and try and get almost better draft picks out of these things. Because I feel like in the next few years, until guys like Myers and Ekman-Larsson and their awful contracts, as soon as those things go up, there's not really a whole lot we can do. I think that the best for the Canucks is to probably get rid of Horvat, get rid of Besser, get as many picks as they can, rely on Demko, Pettersson, and probably like Hughes as well as kind of the core. I feel like the Canucks are kind of stuck with Myers for now, but that doesn't mean that anything can change. There's really nothing we can do about that right now. But kind of like sticking with these main guys, do you see like right now that getting rid of Horvat, I mean, Like that sounds bad, like getting rid of Horvat. The problem is the guy's probably going to score at least 50 goals this year, and he's going to want 11 million for 8 years. So, and we like the Canucks can't really do that right now. So, like, what do you think is realistic for the Canucks right now?
Well, it certainly seems like it's trending towards a trade. That's more likely than a contract extension. And to your point, I mean, if Bo is looking to cash in for the money that he could be getting for the season he's having, I don't think he's getting that here in Vancouver. And coming into the season, maybe the thought was you get Bo Horvat signed to a contract, over 8 years, something like $6 million per season or something along those lines. To your point, that shifted significantly higher. I don't know if Vancouver's willing to offer more than maybe $7 million per season over 8 years. And I don't think they've made that offer yet, which is the same amount of money as JT Miller got, but it's an extra year. So the annual average is $7 million instead of $8 million. If you would have asked me a year ago, is that enough to get Bo signed? I'd say that's more than enough to get Bo Horvat signed.
Yep,
now the question is that even enough for Bo Horvat to return your call on that type of an offer? And if he says no to that, if Vancouver goes that far in terms of their offer, I don't think he's coming back. I can see the Canucks looking at him and saying, okay, we'll do the JT contract in terms of money, but 8 years, $7 million per season. Let's see if Bo does that. If Bo says no to that, I think he's getting traded. And that's why it looks like there's greater chance of him getting traded, to your point, because it looks like his market in free agency has grown significantly. He might be the top center available next year, especially if Dylan Larkin re-signs with the Red Wings. And we'll see what happens with Ryan O'Reilly. But Ryan O'Reilly obviously a bit older. Bo is younger and coming off a big season. So it just comes down to this stage. How does Bo Horvat feel about how the negotiations have gone? And if he's willing to take less to stay in Vancouver, because that's really what it's going to have to take. And I still think there's a possibility that happens, because I do believe Bo wants to stay in Vancouver still, and he really cares about being here still, and the family's situated. So I see that still being a possibility, but maybe it's 60, 70 he gets traded, 30, 40 that he stays. But I'm interested to see if he does accept the last little kick of the can the organization does here, because I think that could happen over the next couple of weeks.